My name is Francis Siemens. I've owned Stateline Speedway for the past 25 years. I bought the track from Leonard Briggs, Don Frank, and Jerry Frank in 1985. The year 2010 will mark the 55th consecutive year that Stateline has been in operation. Although I've made some changes through the years, I'm proud to carry on the racing tradition. My goal has been to provide the drivers with a competitive track for the enjoyment of the fans. I believe the original owners would agree with me that it's been a fun ride for all. Let's watch how it all got started way back in 1956.
It was 1956. In an open field on an otherwise wooded 77-acre abandoned farm located on a narrow dirt road in the town of Bustye, a dream became reality. There on the Courtright Road, just a couple of miles from their homes in neighboring Sugar Grove, Pennsylvania, 5 men began construction of a dirt oval that would change their lives and the lives of all who came in contact with Stateline Speedway from that day forward. The vision for Stateline Speedway came from Leonard Briggs and his 4 friends, Lloyd Williams, Jerry Frank, Don Frank, and Marv Thorpe. Leonard, a former stock car racer at several area tracks, was the president of the very popular and successful Skyline Speedway, located a short jaunt from his home in Sugar Grove. Briggs and his 2 Skyline partners, Cliff Coons and Lowell White, had introduced auto racing to the sleepy border town in 1953. Initially, modifieds competed on Sundays at the 3rd Mile track that was set high on a hill just east of town. In 1955, the highly popular late models were added to the card at the appropriately named oval with a majestic view of the surrounding countryside. Len's friends, Lloyd, Marv, Don, and Jerry, were valuable help at the Skyline Speed Plant.
Lloyd was the announcer. Marv Thorpe was the flagman up there. Don and I worked and helped build the bleachers, and I took care of water in the racetrack, and Leonard, he was the electrician, plus he did the track rules.
Despite the apparent success at the front gate and with the racing action, all was not well at Skyline. Disagreements arose between Briggs and Coons. Len, Lloyd, Marv, Don, and Jerry decided to form a new venture with a plan to buy the track. A meeting was arranged to make the purchase offer.
I was involved with Skyline Speedway for 2 years up there. Then we had little problems with our partners, and so I got out of that track and got other partners and built Stateline.
The Briggs Consortium then made their next move. If they couldn't own Skyline, they'd open their own track. But where would they build such a facility? While driving around the area looking for a suitable location, the boys discovered the parcel of land that would become Stateline.
And Lloyd is the one that ran around all over the country trying to find land to build the racetrack.
We got together and talked about if we could find enough land, we'd build a track. You know, us 5 guys. So that's what we did. We found the land.
They were just trying to get a place that didn't bother any of the neighbors. You know, they were trying to not stir up problems with the people around there, and there was not too much population up there.
Yeah, that's right.
So
The lady was in New York City, I think, and Lloyd Williams went there and made arrangements to buy it. And I went to the bank and we borrowed the money.
Lloyd and my brother, they went and got the land.
Okay.
Maybe under a little bit of false pretenses. I don't know exactly how it went down. I wasn't there, but I know Lloyd told told the lady that they were going to drive some posts, which we drove a lot of posts. $1,200 for 77 acres. Can you imagine that? I don't know if we bought it right or not. In today's dollars, it sure would be.
$1,200 bucks, 77 acres.
Yeah.
Yeah, well.
When we took that place over up there, started building a racetrack, we screwed up a good lover's lane. We bushwhacked a lot of people out of there. The house had fallen down there, right by where the pond is, right in that area. There's a driveway back up in there, and there's a bunch of trees, and these, I don't know what they were doing. They were backed up in there doing something.
By April 1956, the deed was secured, so the partners were able to begin construction. Word of the operation quickly spread, and a lot of curious people came to see what was going on, and many offered to help.
I can remember when they was building it, where the parking lot is out there now, it was just, they had, some of the brush cut out of there already, but there was thorn brush and scrub brush that it was pulling. There wasn't any sign of a racetrack yet, other than maybe some stakes out there or something, so it took a while before we went, figured out what the layout was going to be.
Yeah.
Actually got into it was out a lot of money because we had a lot of friends around this town, the farmers and stuff. They helped us out, and didn't cost us nothing but a free pass every year to the Speedway and stuff like that, and that's how we got started. We didn't have no money, us guys.
In fact, that's how we cut a lot of timber off that when we first bought it, to get some money. And then we'd also cut the timber off to build the bleachers and the guardrails.
When we started building that track, there was one guy from over by Asheville that drove his tractor from there to the racetrack every night and worked with us and every weekend.
Wow.
For nothing. He done that. A lot of guys that raced, Frank Leffner raced, and he just lived up the road. He'd come down there and work, and his brother-in-law, Donnie Peterson, he come down and worked, and a lot of guys come up and donated their time just because they wanted to see it go.
I think a lot of it was, I think Leonard had a lot of friends, and Marv had a lot of friends, and everybody, they was known, they'd lived here all their life.
All right.
So they decided that this was where they was going to go. It has Stateline Speedway.
When they decided to build Stateline Speedway, they needed someone to cut the guard posts and the wheel fence posts and the bleacher posts. So that was our line of work, was logging. So my brothers had a couple of tractors, and they helped them lay out the track and made the first track with their tractors. And it wasn't easy, but we got it done.
The Lindstrom boys over on the Courtright Road there, they cut the trees out of the woods. The guy that did the bulldoze, he owned a store there. Well, where Wilcox Brothers is in Sugar Grove now, his name was Frank Darrell. And they moved the dirt off the track and made the track. At the end of the year, we didn't have no money to pay him. And we went to Frank, and it wasn't a problem at all. We told him we'd get him paid in the next year, next fall. I don't think he even charged us any interest. I mean, that's how tough things work, because we didn't get started until July, so we didn't have very much.
We had the lights up.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, some of the guys that worked at the electric company in Jamestown helped put them lights up.
Okay.
They'd come out and donate their time and put them up and help. We had a lot of time donated to work on that track when we built it.
Good.
So I did go up and help them what I could, because I remember I had a 51 Ford pickup, and they were putting the guardrails up at Stateline, and I hooked the truck on to drag the cable because they couldn't pull it.
What was the theory behind the beer tent only being on one side of the track?
We were just ahead of our time, that's all. We were, today they try to separate the beer drinkers. We was trying to separate them back then.
Yeah, you were.
Because New York State, front side, for years, people thought that the line went on through the middle or something like that.
I've heard.
But we were just trying to separate the beer drinkers from the people who didn't want to be around beer.
Yeah.
We used to sell a lot of beer.
After 3 months of feverish activity, Stateline Speedway was ready for a July grand opening.
You ain't nothing but a hound dog, crying all the time. You ain't nothing but a hound dog, crying.
Following a Herculean effort by the 5 partners, with substantial assistance from their friends and neighbors, the new Stateline Speedway was finally ready to open its gates. However, Mother Nature was not. 2 consecutive rainy Saturday nights pushed back the opener to July 21st, 1956. Even that day dawned in the rain, but by mid-afternoon the sun had appeared and the races were on.
We was 3 weeks getting the first race going.
Because of rain?
Rain. And then when it did, it rained the day we did open, and it was just a mess. Had to pull them in with tractors, people in the parking lot, and it wasn't a good scene, I'll tell you that.
The track was so wet. I went out, pulled down, and I was going down the back straightaway to come around, and I got stuck going down the back straightaway, so they had to pull me out.
And that first night was that was really something. I didn't race the first night, but I was there till about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning pushing cars out of the mud. It was terrible.
Oh, it was crazy. It had rained, I don't know how many days before that.
Right.
Everybody and their brother was stuck in the parking lot. The track wasn't all that bad, but yeah, it was crazy.
That first night that Emery won that feature, after the race, we spent a lot of time pulling cars out of the mud, because they were in that parking lot and they were into the running boards,
Right.
you know. And my wrecker was up there, and then we got 2 or 3 farmers, Chuck Peterson and some of those guys nearby, with tractors, and come down and pull these cars out. And I thought to myself, my gosh, these people will never come back. But it didn't stop.
Right.
They came.
The honor of winning the first ever feature race at Stateline fell to popular Warren driver Emery Mann, driving a 55 Chevy with his distinctive 8-ball on the doors.
It's our 300 to win that race. And after we got all our change and pennies and nickels and dimes after the race, we was cut her pretty short. Well, we paid right after the race. So Emery comes over, and nobody says anything to Emery. Emery says, don't even worry about my money tonight.
The drivers were jumping all over us at a meeting we had one time after that year. They were telling us we were no damn good. I told about, well, some of you guys liked us because I remember one guy let us use his money for a while because $300. And Emery got up and he says, I'm sorry, but he says, I never did collect that, did I?
Stateline's second race, a week later, went much smoother, and Joe Sonner grabbed the win in his twin-auto Ford.
Joe Saunders, if there was that much room between 2 cars, he'd try to get in there. And he lost his sponsor, and they owned a junkyard.
Rains returned and washed out the third week partway through the show, so double features were on the bill for August 11th. Al Tazin in a Hudson Jet paced the 13-car field on a sloppy track to take the first feature, while Sonner captured the second contest. Yet another rainout and then another Sonner victory accounted for the next 2 Saturdays.
Do you have any recollections of Joe Sonner?
Oh, yeah. Riding a motorcycle at North Main Street Extension, standing on the seat. That was the kind of guy he was. He was a pretty good race car. He drove for Twin Auto there, and yeah, he got around there pretty good. But that was what he was all about, you know, just kind of daredevil stuff.
The Labor Day holiday weekend featured a 150-lap team race, which was won by the team of Joe Sonner in his late model and Sammy Lamancuso in his early model Plymouth.
And you were part of a unique thing called a team race.
That's how I wound up there,
Yeah.
because I was racing down to Jamestown Speedway. So one day, Harold Anderson or Harold Johnson stopped by the garage, one of the Twin Auto gang there, and they were running cars for Joe Sonner. So Harold stopped down and asked me if I would team up with Joe in this team race at Stateline. And I says I'd love to, because I had a pretty nice car at the time. It was a 51 Plymouth, I believe. And it ran really good, and he asked me to run with him. And I had to wind up winning that race, because his car broke.
We had a team race up there, and I had an old 49 Ford, and I was racing with Eb Young out of somewhere down there in Pennsylvania. We were a team, so each part of the team had a race for a little while, so many laps, you know. But anyways, I was out there, and we was motoring around there on a caution flag because they had a big wreck or something there, you know. I'm looking up the stand, look to see where my family is up there, and I turned around, and everybody had stopped, and I hit him right square in the back end. Motor mounts broke on that Ford, and the motor went forward, and it stretched the throttle out, and it was screaming, and I looked at, of course, Emery, he turned around and looked, and I went, brakes failed. I never even got to the brake pedal. I hit him.
The final two Saturdays of the challenging first season saw Emery Mann and Kenny Johnson receive the laurels. Joe Sonner was declared the first Stateline champion. The 1956 season was finally over. The magnitude of what had been accomplished in just a few months was remarkable.
You shake my nerves and you rattle my brain. Too much of love drives a man insane. You broke my will, but what a thrill.
After the fits and starts associated with the opening season, sweeping changes were made for the 1957 campaign. The infield was shaved, and higher grandstands were constructed on the front side to allow better visibility for the spectators. A route was built on the turns 3 and 4 side of the track to allow spectators passage between the Pennsylvania and New York sides of the facility, while the former walkway through the pits was closed. Joe Sonner was poised to defend his title in the Twin Auto Ford. Fan favorites Dean Layfield in a 56 Ford and Emery Mann in a fuel-injected 57 Chevy were joined by newcomers Stanley Squirt Johns from faraway Brockway, Gentleman Jim Patrick from Conneaut, Ohio, and a kid from just down the road, Bust Eyes Bobby Schnars.
Maybe by then I'd heard about the purses were better over there, maybe something like that. I'm sure money would have made a difference.
Started in the feature, the very first one I started in, and if I remember right, I was like about third or fourth back on the inside of the starting lineup, you know. So we come around, and geez, it was roaring there. The cars was making my car vibrate even. So I thought, well, I'm not gonna, you know, dive right into that first corner wildly and spin out or anything. I'm gonna take it a little bit cautious going in there. Well, there was somebody behind me that was ready to go. They gave me a boot in there. I went out and hit the guy that's on the outside of me, and I dove to the inside, and by that time there was a couple more coming through in there. And by the time we got to the end of the backstretch, I was last. I had to fight back.
The season opener, which featured a pre-race parade by the Jamestown Vikings Drum and Bugle Corps, was captured by Kane's Hyle Russell. Squirt took the next two shows before Gil Lathrop scored an upset win in the second annual Gus Johnson Memorial 50-lapper. Don Bailey, a neighbor of Squirt's from Brockway, won the first Saturday in June before Emery Mann went on a tear in his 57 fuel-injected Chevy, winning 3 of the next 4, interrupted only by Sonner. Emery would be the car to beat all season long. He consistently had the fastest car, but burned pistons and resultant did-not finishes plagued his championship hopes.
Then, of course, in '57, Emery came along with the fuel-injected Chevy, and now he put on some driving lessons for the boys wherever he went. Emery was good.
Dean Layfield, who thrilled the crowd with his sideways at the flag stand driving style, captured the mid-season 50-lap championship, witnessed by 4,500 customers.
Dean Layfield, Dean used to like to turn the cars sideways about at the flag stand and went around there, and I thought that was the fast way around, you know, so I kind of idolized him in the early days. He was kind of a showman. I know when he was leading, he'd be looking in the stands some of the time when he was sliding around the corners.
Joe Sonner, Madman Johnny McGinley, and Sonner again would see Marv Thorpe's checkered flag in the next 3 outings. Jim Patrick's 56 Ford copped the next 2 shows, including the 50-lap Grand Championship. The championship race was marred by a horrific wreck involving Eddie Kisco. Newspaper accounts reported Kisco's brush with tragedy occurred on the 42nd lap. Running a lap behind at close to 60 miles an hour, his car slammed into Joe Sonner's park number 18, which had thrown a tire 9 laps earlier and was stalled driverless in front of the grandstand. As Kisco's machine spun top-like in midair, Emery Mann in 8-ball, gunning hard in second place, rammed at full force. Mann's car staggered into the infield while Kisco's bounced down the track like a rubber ball. Hard-bitten drivers joined spectators in holding their breaths as the car was yanked upright. The roof fell off and the roll bars collapsed like spaghetti on the floor, but Kisco was pried out without a scratch.
Really, one bad night when I was flagman, there was a wreck right in front of me. A guy rolled over and he was in his car and another guy hit it. Mister, I didn't think things were going to look too good, but it worked out okay. He was lucky he didn't get hurt much. I mean, he was stunned, but that was bad to climb down out of that flag. I had that red flag out and getting everybody in the infield so they couldn't, no more cars run into him, you know.
Kisco gave his version of what transpired. They said I was knocked out, but that just isn't true. I remember everything. Johnny McGinley was the first man over to my car when it stopped bouncing. He looked in and asked me if I was okay. I told him, "Yes, John, have them turn the car over, but do it easy."
I was just driving like this, you know, and it was almost to the end, and I was looking to see what flag, you know, they were going to put out. Because it was about 2 or 3 laps to go, and I thought, geez, is that one lap to go or 2 laps to go or what it was? And I just kept looking and looking. And I was looking like this, and then that's when I slammed into the car and flipped over. It's just the way it happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, they flipped, I said, flip it over, and they flipped it over, and the roof was right on top of the seat. And it ripped it up, opened up like that, and I got out and I waved. I said, I'm all right.
The final 2 late model events of the year were captured by Emery Mann and Squirt Johns. Despite winning a single race to Emery's 5, consistent Dean Layfield was named the 1957 point champion. Stateline Speedway saw more facility improvements during the off-season, such as the addition of storm drains, a landscaped infield, and a revamped ticket office. However, the most significant change occurred in the management of the track. Original partner Marv Thorpe left the ownership group to focus his attention on his service station business and to resume his idled racing career. The 4 remaining owners, Len Briggs, Lloyd Williams, Don Frank, and Jerry Frank, incorporated themselves as Bus-Dye Speedways, Inc.
After the experience I had had, which was kind of comical out of Jamestown Speedway, to go on out and find these guys, Lenny Briggs and Lloyd Williams, Don Franks, that these guys were absolutely all for the drivers. And the furthest thing from any sort of corruption. There were a bunch of guys that had a bunch of rules. They had just enough business sense to get that going. I just thought they were just wonderful, wonderful people. And they supported the drivers. They supported safety as much as they could, and they just really did a terrific job. And they knew how to run a racetrack.
The 1958 racing season will be remembered as one of Stateline's most competitive years. 20 feature events were contested, resulting in 14 different winners. The only repeat winners during the season were veterans Dean Layfield with 4 wins, Jim Patrick with 3, and Squirt Johns with 2 scores. The Jamestown Post-Journal sports writer Doug Smith dubbed the group of feature winners the I Won a Feature Club and wrote glowing reports of the throttle mashers who were being initiated into the fraternity. New members included Bud Fiersdorf, John Seeley, Eb Young, Leon Lindstrom, Marv Thorpe, Jim Feeblecorn, and Mike Egan. Past Stateline winners Joe Sonner, Madman McGinley, and Emery Mann also saw starter Jim Ponder's checkered flag. Sports writer Doug Smith described Fiersdorf's winning machine as a decrepit-looking 1955 Ford. The fenders dangle, there's not an undented piece on it, and the whole contraption looks as if a good sneeze would reduce it to a pile of rubble.
I'll tell you, we was coming back from Stateline one night. I had a 56 Ford, and back in them days it was always the oil line run along the pan. It was always hop up the oil pump, you pull the spring out, put a screw in the spring to build up the oil pressure and everything going. My wife was towing a race car coming back from Stateline, and I was an always early to bed fella. I was sleeping, she said to me, the red light come on, the oil light come on. I said, turn up the radio and gas it. About 2 miles in the engine bowl, but what happened?
After his feature win, Smith quoted the exalted John Seeley as saying, "After 6 years, I'd say it was about time." Describing Dean Layfield's win in the Gus Johnson Memorial, the verbose Smith wrote that trophies have the same effect on Dean that electric trains have on small boys. He goes for them in a big way. Johnny McGinley's victory drive was at the wheel of a mongrel machine, according to Smith. It seemed the car began life as a 56 Chevy convertible, but was transformed when the hardtop off a 57 model was attached. Eb Young's upset victory over Squirt Johns produced an account glibly depicted by Smith as an epic little man versus big man battle. Smith said the near photo finish was decided by less than the difference in their heights. Joe Sonner's winner's quote on August 2nd brought baseball to the mind of the voluble Mr. Smith. An 18-car pileup was initiated by a tangle between Sonner and Bud Finale. The wreck reduced the 30-car field to just 18, and Sonner was able to restart and subsequently win the $250 prize. Joe Sonner sounded like a dyed-in-the-wool Yankee fan talking about Casey Stengel. Smith wrote, "Lucky," he said, "nothing but luck. Never deserved to win, got every break in the book." Bust Ice Speedways booked a NASCAR-sanctioned race for July 16th. Unfortunately, several top NASCAR drivers advertised to appear failed to show. The vast majority of the 23 entrants were regular Saturday night racers.
I was sick. But anyway, they were on strike from the last race they were on. And so a lot of them didn't show up, so we had to bring all these local drivers in to run against them.
Right. Who were some of the race drivers that you drew in on that race? Do you remember?
Lee Petty, for one. Shorty Rollins won. Squirt and Lee Petty had a good race that night.
We had a sponsored NASCAR race in 1958, and a lot of the NASCAR guys we figured was going to be there, and a lot of them never showed up. We had to call up some of our local people to put on enough cars for the show. But there was a fellow, Lee Petty, that was running for points that year, was there, put on a good show with a 56 Oldsmobile, I believe he was running at the time. The fellow that won that race by the name of Shorty Rollins, won the race at Stateline. He went on the next following year in 59 and won the first 100-mile qualifying race at Daytona Beach, and haven't heard of him much since, but he's still in the books that way.
1958, when they brought the NASCAR up here.
What do you remember about that race?
Well, they had 10 cars, I think, that night. And
10 NASCAR cars?
10 NASCAR.
That's it?
Yep. Old Man Petty.
Yeah.
come over and he says, well, do you have any local drivers? I said, yeah, but I said, their cars are not legal to run with you guys. He says, we need cars. He told Red and I, he said, we need cars. And he says, and I don't care what they are. He says, can you get them? Well, John Seeley was in the stands, and Paul Wilson was in the stands, and a few of the others. And Marv had one, and they were all in the stands, so we went up and started talking to them. And we got them to go get their cars. And the steward for the NASCAR, he said, well, it has to be inspected. And Petty says, no, they don't. And he says, well, it has to join NASCAR. He says, no, they don't.
When Lee Petty was there, I was racing that night. And he come in the pit, and he said, I was parked right beside him, and he said, some of the boys like to play a little bit, and I said, well, maybe. He says, I'll play with them.
NASCAR race at Stateline up there, I think it was 150 lapper or something. I put it down as 916 because the old car I had was a 56 Chevy, and I hadn't never raced it yet. I was racing the Oldsmobile. And well, that Chevy wasn't as beat up, you know, the Olds had got pretty well beat up, and this was supposed to be a big NASCAR race, so the Stateline guys wanted me to go down and get that car because they lacked cars. And that had one door off from it. It came out from Dean Layfield's car. It was 9/16 on the door. You know, it wasn't painted or anything, and so they put it 916. They called the number for the car then. There wasn't a lot of NASCAR cars that showed up, but it was mainly Lee Petty, and the guy that won was Shorty Rollins. I really wasn't in the race with them. Squirt Johns and Lee Petty had a pretty close race. As I remember, you know, I'd see them when they come back, when they was laughing at me.
One driver who did find his way to Bust-I was NASCAR pioneer Lee Petty, who was the fast qualifier in his number 42 Oldsmobile. Of the 23 starters, just 13 were still running when Shorty Rollins took the checkered flag. Finishing second through fifth were locals Bob Duell, Kenny Johnson, Emery Mann, and John Seeley. Lee Petty finished eighth. Stateline regulars Bud Finale, John Walker, Bob Schnars, Carl Tyler, and Bud Gardner were also still running at the end. Season attendance was reported as 45,000 paid spectators, including a season-high 4,462 on August 30th, to witness Jim Patrick win the 100-lap Grand Championship and clinch the 1958 point title. Unlike the previous season, in which 14 different drivers flew under starter Marv Thorpe's checkered flag, 1959 saw just 5 drivers reach victory circle in the 17 events. Rapidly improving Bust-I Bob Schnars grabbed the first 2 feature wins of his young career. Sammy Lamancuso, winless since his team race victory in '56, finally booted the monkey from his back to claim a win. And fan favorite, old 8-ball Emery Mann rolled to another popular win.
Emery Mann.
What a gentleman. They're one of a kind.
Yeah.
Nice. Never had a bad word for anybody. Really great guy.
Everybody's got better stories than I have. I mean, I did it for the sheer pleasure or thrill of it. It didn't seem like a big deal. In fact, you know, you didn't talk a lot about it sometimes because people thought you were playing crazy to go out there and run around.
Oh, I hear you.
It wasn't an honorable thing most of the time. And I can remember, you know, on these cold nights, you always waited for the first guy to blow a tire so you could set the tire on fire to keep it from freezing to death, you know.
But the real story of the 1959 season was the battle between 2 Pennsylvania throttle stompers, Kane's Hal Russell and Brockway's Squirt Johns. Squirt claimed an unprecedented 8 feature events, including 4 in a row to begin the year, 3 50-lappers, and the 100-lap Grand Championship race.
When the feature was over, they'd let them little kids come out and stand between the guard fence and the wheel fence, I guess you call it. And I guess one night they come out and started crawling in, and I said, sure, you know. This car right here, I drove that into the pits when it was so covered with kids, I had to back up to get up over the little hump to get in the pits because it was dragging so heavy it would spin. I thought it was great, but I knew no insurance company would have ever approved it, and I was proud to let them kids ride on it.
Meanwhile, Heil earned 5 victories with 2 50-lap wins to his credit. Although the big man in the orange 511 won more races, the slight man in the turquoise 4 parlayed more consistent finishes to claim the track championship. Russell received a new TV set and $125 for his efforts. Much of the credit for Russell's success was given to the owner and chief mechanic of the Fabulous 4, Frank Ruhlman. Johns, on the other hand, when asked who constructed his speedy 57 Chevy, proudly responded, "I built her myself." Fans continued to find their way to the Bust-I Oval in record numbers in '59. On 4 different nights, over 3,500 customers paid to see the action, including a record 5,138 for the Gus Johnson Memorial. The track owners built 1,000 more seats to accommodate the fans.
I can remember Don Frank used to carry planks and cement blocks down front and put another row of seats down front because they'd have such a huge crowd. But I mean, they packed the place. People would be sitting on the restroom roofs. And Don told me just a few years ago, he says, you know how I could tell the crowds? He says, if I walked in back the bleachers and looked through toward the track, if I couldn't see the track, he says, I thought we were in good shape because there's a lot of legs hanging.
2 100-lap jalopy races were contested in '59. Both of the races were captured by drivers who would soon be joining the late model ranks at Stateline. Mike Komisarski edged Kenny C. in August, while Tom Dill put on a daring exhibition to take the Labor Day event.
To have 100-lap jalopy races up there, and I didn't consider my car a jalopy, but needless to say, we had that one race up there. There must have been 80 cars started that race. I mean, there was cars all the way around the track. Well, they had a lot of cautions and everything, you know, to clean the junk up during the race, and ended up, Mike was in front of me at the very last 2 or 3 laps, and I thought Ponder was the starter. I thought he was telling me I was number 1, you know. Well, when the race was over, and I could have passed him. I had a better car than Mike did. But he ended up winning the race, and here I had 3 laps. I could have got by him. You know, that Oldsmobile I had to run really good. And so anyways, I always thought of anybody that I was glad to see win was him, because he passed away at an early age. He had heart problems, but whale of a nice guy.
A friend of mine traded me a motorcycle, and I started liking them, and then I raced them locally. And then I found out they gave money away for driving cars.
It says here, Stateline fans first heard of Tom Dill in 1959 when the track was running 100-lap jalopy championships. Tom towed in and outlasted a field of some 100 cars.
There was a bunch.
You ran the 100-lap jalopy championship there.
Yeah, and the following year too, same car.
Same car.
Mother Nature was not kind to the raceway proprietors in 1960. An especially rainy summer resulted in just 14 weeks of racing. A preview of things to come occurred the first week. Try as they might to get the show in, the 4th separate shower of the day brought an early end to the race and a surprise victor on opening night. Sprinkles began falling on the 5th lap of the scheduled 25-lap feature, and when it was finally halted on lap 14, Gordon Jug Pierce, an Indian youth from Onaville, piloting a combination of baling wire, scotch tape, and a '57 Chevy, found the finish line first before 2,500 surprised fans.
Jug Pierce.
Oh, yep, that old Jug. Yep, he was a character.
they came out with a $100 bonus for a new car. So he went and got some tape, and he taped some cardboard and made some wings on the back, you know, so we made a 57 out of it. You know? And that was fine till they blew off.
I think it was Red or somebody went over to his car one time, and there was this supposed to be a fire extinguisher there, and there was a can of beer in there instead of a fire extinguisher.
I started out the season with last year's car, and I won the first feature. Well, it was a pretty well beat-up car, you know, being all through the season. And had the other car already almost built, 57 Chevy. But it needed part of some quarter panels and one door panel, and take one of those big old cartons that a windshield come in, and I made me some quarter panels and a door skin out of that, painted it up, and let her just look nice as hell. On the white flag lap, I was going down the backstretch, and somebody tried to pass and tore one of my quarter panels off. And some of it was cardboard. For 2 weeks, people were handing me pieces of cardboard, you know. I had a fire extinguisher canister, and take the top off and slip a couple beers in there. Briggs and I think Jerry used to wonder how the hell I come off the track drinking a beer.
Eddie Kisco made his first ever Stateline Victory Lane visit the next week when he captured the Gus Johnson Memorial. Teammate and fellow Kane resident Hyle Russell rode Frank Roman's other 57 Chevy to the checkered flag the first Saturday in June. The following week, rains doused the crowd and completely wiped out the 50-lap feature. 4,286 customers took advantage of a discounted rain check the following week to witness Russell make it 2 straight wins. Although the 4th of July was still a week away, Gil Lathrop and Bud Finale provided the fireworks anyway. During heat action, Lathrop leaned on Bud and gave him a good shove. Spun out and boiling over, Finale laid in wait and whacked Gil as he made the next circuit. The two men later traded insults in the pits before being separated by cooler heads.
Good old Bud. There was one guy he didn't take any shit from nobody. I mean it, literally. He wouldn't stand there and argue with you. He'd flatten you. That's as simple as that. That was as simple as that. He did all his arguing with his hands.
Bud Finale was the one that had the quick trigger. I mean, the guy that owned this car here went over to say something to him one time about a wreck he had involved. Man, he turned around, he busted out about 3 teeth there, just turned around and plowed him up the ear, you know. I mean, yeah, you had to kind of walk with gentleness around, otherwise you'd be in quite a confrontation of some sort.
Bust-Eye Bobby Schnars won his career 3rd in the feature race. Chuck Piazza, whose career had previously had more heartbreaks than a country and western song, delighted 4,000 strong by winning the Firecracker 50, his first ever Stateline feature.
Well, I think my first race that I won was probably the Firecracker 50, and I think it was with that 57 Chevrolet, so that could have been probably around 60. And first race that I won, and certainly was big race for that area, and then was fortunate enough to be able to come back the next year and win it again. So
Bob Schnars recorded the first ever Stateline Triple Crown the following week when he captured a heat, a semifinal, and a feature race all in the same night. A week later, Schnars made it 3 feature wins in his last 4 outings.
Well, Bobby he was a hell of a driver. I mean, he could get a car around a race. And they back then, there was nowhere near the technology there is today. I mean, the technology was in your head, you know. It wasn't. I mean, they did things that, you know, killed one spark plug so there's only running on 7 so they get traction and all kinds of stuff like that, you know. Really? I mean, they were good at that. And so he was definitely, he was one of, I won't say he was the biggest fan drawer, but he was right up the top because he was good. There wasn't any better.
Bobby Schnars
he, you know, if it wasn't for Bobby Schnars, I'd have been a hero, you know. I mean, I followed that man around the racetrack all my life, and he was so hard to beat. And he worked hard on his race car. He was one of the first people that really spent time.
The Kane Comet, Hyle Russell, stopped Schnars' streak on July 23rd as he edged out the M1 Chevy to prevail in the 50-lap midseason championship. Next on tap, following yet another rainout, was an upset win by rookie Tom Dill. Although Tom, a raw-boned fugitive from motorcycling, won a 100-lap jalopy race at Stateline last season, this was his first ever late model triumph in Bust Eye. In fact, it was the first feature Tom had even finished all season. Campaigning a newly built 1960 Chevrolet Impala with many bugs to be worked out, Tom had previously commented on his season struggles by saying, "We found a new mistake every week."
Well, most of them didn't bother me, but Dill would scare you. He wanted to win. That's the only way.
Right.
And if you were in his way, look out. He used to scare me. I was a little kid.
Mm-hmm.
I only weighed nothing, and this guy was an animal.
But Tom, you couldn't do anything to him to intimidate him. I mean, he'd come right back and get you the next week and do it intensely and then laugh like hell about it. Another night, Tom put Ronnie Blackmer and Julian Busink's 64 Ford right up on the guardrails. The car sat right up on the guardrails, sat right there. And he just, you know, you couldn't scare him. Tom's never been scared in his life.
Unusually winless in 1960, Squirt Johns remedied the problem by winning the next 2 weeks. He followed up a win on August 13th by capturing the Birch Ruth Memorial Race for the second consecutive year, thus being able to permanently claim the handsome trophy for his home in Brockway.
Squirt Johns. When I mention Squirt Johns, what's that mean to Tom Dill?
He was a class of the field at that time. Yeah.
Why was he so good, Tom?
He cheated a little.
Eddie Kisco then scored his second victory of the year before Schnars grabbed the biggest win of his young career, the 100-lap Grand Championship, before a crowd of 4,359.
Well, yeah, you gave Bobby run because he was going to pass you anyhow.
Although Bob Schnars was the leading feature winner for the year with 4 flags, consistent Hyle Russell repeated as track champion. In 1961, fans were greeted by some changes at Stateline. Improvements were made to the guard posts, and a higher wheel fence was built. Capacity was also increased to 4,000 seats. Concession stands were operated by the fire departments of Bust Eye, Sugar Grove, and Chandler's Valley.
The fire department, Sugar Grove Fire Department, had a concession stand. Saturday mornings, there was a crew in the fire hall peeling potatoes. Oh, hundreds of pounds of potatoes. And there was a fella and his wife went up to the Stateline every Saturday and fried the French fries ahead of time. And then they just dump them in the fryers during the races, you know, for 5 minutes or less, and they were all set. I mean, those are real potatoes. Yeah.
Racing was extremely competitive in '61. 10 different Leadfoots carried the checkered flag in 15 events. Tom Dill led the way with 3 scores.
I'll tell you something about Tom Dill. I think he had more talent to drive a race car than, I mean, all-around talent. He didn't do a terrible amount of winning at Stateline, but he could do things with a car that I'd never seen anybody else do, you know.
Bob Schnars, Chuck Piazza, and Kenny Johnson each won twice. Single victories were recorded by Emery Mann, Fred Knapp, Hyle Russell, Bob Duell, Floyd Finale, and Sammy Lamacuso. One of Kenny's wins was in the Gust Johnson Memorial, a race he first organized 5 years ago in memory of his late father. Another popular win was achieved by Emery Mann driving a '61 Rambler Ambassador.
Emery Man was kind of the Yankees of the time. He either loved him or you hated him. And because of his very no-nonsense, get-out-of-my-way driving style, and that big 8-ball on the car, you never forget that. You know, so the first time I ever saw him in a coat and tie selling automobiles, I thought, who is this guy? Yeah, I mean, he was a big guy. But you look at this guy coming down the track, and here comes the track accountant. It's got just, you know, the big thick glasses, and he just became a different. It was like Clark Kent stepped into that automobile.
A tally in the season-ending 100-lapper was earned by veteran Jamestowner Sammy Lamancuso.
Sammy, he's another one. Same thing. He's quiet, never said too much, but hard worker, and very, very, very intelligent. Very intelligent. I mean, he could fix anything. He still can. Yeah.
Well, obviously, I was blessed to be raised in a family with an Uncle Sam in it. You know, he was a big part of our life. He was a celebrity in our life growing up. You know, and as a kid, going to Stateline and going to Erie's. I mean, we waited for the weekends. We couldn't wait till the weekends to be able to experience that. And he was just a great guy, and he was family-oriented. He was competitive. But the one thing about him that stood out from the standpoint of how he affected the rest of his family was he was a perfectionist. And we all have that kind of quality, and that basically came from him.
Duel's win in the midseason championship resulted in a protest being filed by ace car builder Frank Ruhlman. He accused the owner of Duel's number 52 Ford, Julian Busink, of having a locked rear end in the car, a violation of track rules. After posting a $25 teardown fee, Ruhlman and a crowd of 250 spectators watched as Len Briggs and crew dismantled the Ford's gear case. Oddly enough, the 1961 championship was won by a man who never captured a feature race during the year. Squirt Johns driving the 511 Dodge Pumpkin.
You were the point champion at Stateline in 1961 and never won a race. That's consistency.
That's right. Yeah, that was that's when I first built this Dodge right here, and that was on account of a weak motor.
Two important events occurred in '61 that would have an enormous effect on the fans and competitors of Stateline Speedway. First, management had long thought that their drivers needed another place to race in order to earn enough prize money to support their race cars. After leasing the racetracks in Bradford in 1959 and Smethport in 1960, Bust-Eye Speedways Incorporated built a brand new sister track to Stateline near Erie, Pennsylvania. The appropriately named Erie Speedway opened in July 1961.
It got to the point where we felt we needed another racetrack. We leased Bradford Speedway, and we leased Olean Speedway. We leased McKean County, and then in 2 years at different times. The Bradford, I think we run the most in McKean County. I think we only leased Olean a one race deal. That's all we had was late models. There wasn't any other divisions. And we just felt that they needed more tracks to run on to keep, needed more money.
The other game-changing event of 1961 was the death of Dean Layfield. Layfield was struck in the temple by a stone while competing at Perry Speedway. He died a few days later of a brain injury. The passing of the former Stateline champion had a profound impact on local drivers.
Well, there's been a lot of different things said on that, but I know that day that he went to the races. Bill always went with him, and that day he did not. And we got a telephone call, and Bill took off and went up to Perry and on to Warsaw to the hospital. And the only thing that we knew that day was that that Dean had taken and come off from the straightaway into corner number 1, and he kept right on going and canteened a field. And they figured that a stone come up and hit him. He had a black and blue spot or a mark on his head by his temple, and just one on his chest where the seat belts were. Other than that, that's the only marks he had on him. So, but they said that the head damage was extensive.
Dean was racing at Perry, and Dean, so I wasn't there, and they had what they call some tracks Australian pursuit race, and if you pass a guy, he drops out, and I guess Dean got to lead, I guess, or something, and the car kicked up a stone on the track, and it hit him in the temple, and he died the following Friday. That was on a Sunday, and he died in the Buffalo General Hospital home from, and we went out and seen him Tuesday night, and they said if he made it till Wednesday that he'd make it all right. And so I told them, my brothers and them, I says, he ain't gonna come out of here. He didn't.
It was a terrible loss. It was, you know, you go back to the leader guy, you know, it was Squirt was a leader, Dean was a leader, there was a few other guys that, Kenny Johnson at the time was a pretty important person, and it's a case of where you do lose one of your leaders a little bit, you know, and it's you know, he was the first real racer that lost his life in a race car around here. So it kind of woke us up. You know, it took Dale Earnhardt losing his life for NASCAR to wake up. And up until that point, the reason Dean died is he didn't have on a good helmet. You know, he got hit in the temple, had a leather-sided helmet on. So then everybody starts thinking about driving suits and better helmets and better.
I'll tell you, he was kind of hero of racing back in them days. You couldn't ask a better man. I had trouble with the carburetor and stuff there going, and in between when they had the intermission, Dean come over and worked on my car, and he had a fellow that always went with him. I can't remember his name now, but he was always with Dean. They worked on Dean's car, and Dean come over and worked on mine. Well, I mean, somebody else was working on his. You couldn't beat the fella for being, you know, help out somebody. He was a great help on the racetrack, and he could run one too. I mean, there was no getting out of anything any better.
The 1962 season proved to be another competitive one, as 9 different drivers won the 15 feature races. Much of the credit, or blame, depending on one's perspective, goes to the owners and the system they employed for lining up the cars.
Years and years, the top point man started 19th. The feature winner from the week before started 20th. And they just reversed the points. And wherever you ran in points is where you started your feature race. Didn't matter, other than the feature winner from the week before, he had to start dead last. And the winner always come out of the last 10 cars. They usually start at 25 cars, sometimes 30 cars, sometimes more than that. And but the real slugs got put behind the top 20.
Unfortunately, you know, it was pretty hard to win races up at Stateline Speedway back then. You know, if you won one, you were penalized the next week by starting at the back, and so it always made it hard. And but it made you learn how to come to the front as quick as you could and not get tore up or tear anything up, certainly. But
only 3 drivers were able to win more than once. Squirt Johns led the way with 4 feature wins, including the mid-season championship and the grand championship finale. Veteran Fred Knapp scored 3 times, while Kenny Johnson captured his second Gus Johnson Memorial, as well as the Firecracker 50.
Do you remember Kenny?
Oh, yeah.
What do you remember about him?
The thing I remember most is the last race of Gus Johnson Memorial Trophy. If you won it 3 times, you kept it, and he was leading.
passing me on the fourth turn, and I got over a little bit to give him room because I didn't want to hold him up. I got into the water, and the front end of my car washed out. I hit him in the side, not enough to hurt him, but I could hear him holler at me clear over top the engine.
Kenny Johnson. Kenny Johnson, absolutely. He's gone, is he not?
Yes.
If he didn't go to heaven, all the preachers been lying to us. I mean, just an incredibly sweet man.
Floyd Finale took the honors in the inaugural Dean Layfield Memorial Race.
I won that first Dean Layfield Memorial I won. And I don't know what always made me mad, stuck in my craw about that. I never got a trophy for it. I got the trophy, but I had to give it back.
Well, you didn't get to keep it.
No, the only one I get to keep it was Plero. He said, I'm not giving it back. He still got it.
Other single winners were Sammy Lamancuso, Emery Mann, Eddie Kisco, Tom Dill, and Hyle Russell. Kisco's victory on July 14th was witnessed by Carmen Basilio, the former boxing champion. While congratulating Eddie, Basilio jokingly commented, "After watching this racing action, boxing was not such a dangerous sport after all." After edging Kisco in the mid-season classic, John said of the Candyman from Kane, "He was like a shadow. Every time I looked in my mirror, Eddie was right there. I just couldn't shake him off." Not only was that the sentiment of Mr. Johns on that particular occasion, it may have also been the feelings of all the drivers in 1962. For Kisco combined his single win with many other top results to capture the Stateline Points Championship.
There was nobody who was better on a wet track than Kisco. He was a wet track driver. For some reason, as a wet track slipper, he could outrun just about anybody. And he was kind of like, he reminded me a lot of Snars. He didn't get rattled, he didn't get shook up. He'd see wrecks happen in a lap ahead of time. He never got in wrecks. Eddie didn't. He took a car up there, he never got in a wreck. He just always took it home in one piece. And Bobby was that way too. He just cool and calm. Things that happen, they get excited or can't pass somebody, they just calm. I think that must have had something to do why they had that little edge, you know.
Eddie's 61 Chevy was part of a three-car effort for owner Frank Ruhlman. Number 2, Hyle Russell, and number 4, Ron Blackmer, were his teammates. Kisco's championship was the third for Ruhlman in the past 4 years.
Did Frank give you any instructions beforehand?
Oh, sure.
What did he say? What would he say?
Be careful, don't wreck it.
Frank Roman was smarter than all of us put together. He came up power per weight ratio. Weight is horsepower. He gutted them things out to nothing clear back in them days. I would just cut them from behind the back seat and the driver's seat and put the tin over them, you know. And it was just a shell running around there.
He got every little piece out of it that looked like that he could get away with cutting it out of it.
Right.
He scraped all the undercoating off of it. He cut nuts in half. He had us cutting nuts in half to put on shock absorbers. It didn't even have a washer on, just nut. Save weight. And
the rest of us got great big old heavy old cars, 9,000 horsepower, and he'd go right on by us. He used his knowledge to beat us.
The best way to describe the '63 season is to call it the Squirt and Bobby show. Between the two, they won 2/3 of the 15 races. Squirt with 6, Bobby with 4.
Who's your big competition?
Well, Bobby. Squirt. I mean, you could count on them being in the front.
Right.
Squirt, great guy, smart guy, won a lot of races. He was into springs and rubber, compounds and that stuff way before a lot of us. Because he always talked about that stuff. This tire's too soft, this one's too hard, this spring is too weak. He was pretty sharp. Bobby, everybody used to tease me that I used to get beat by the farmer kid out of Bust Eye. He had a friend that used to come to the garage all the time. He's always teasing me. You let that little farm boy beat you again, huh? Bobby was terrific. He had some good help around him. They had good cars. You know, Frosty was there, and Whitey, I think, was there at the time. They built some good stuff, and he knew how to drive it. And I think he was ahead of us a little bit on clutches and stuff. I've never been able to prove that. I'm going to ask Bobby someday.
Only Sammy Lamancuso's holiday win in the Firecracker 50 prevented the pair of Leadfoots from sweeping the extra-length races. Bob won the midseason championship, while Squirt picked up the Memorial Day Classic, the Dean Layfield Memorial, and the season-ending 100-lapper.
That Squirt was the guy to beat. Squirt had an ability to miss the wrecks, too. And I seemed to find them. I could go like hell and I'd run into somebody. But Squirt was great. I think he learned me how to get around Stateline. Squirt always slowed down a little bit coming into the corner, I figured out finally, instead of... See, I wanted to be like Dean Layfield. I'd throw it up toward the fence and throw it into the corner. And of course, then when the wreck was, I was already coming in flat out, going sideways. Wasn't much I could do, you know. And Squirt's style was a lot better for missing the wrecks.
What was his style?
Well, he just was smooth about it. He'd come up and, you know, he'd slow down. He liked to run the inside, and he just made sure he got traction coming off the corner. And, you know, he just never got excited, I guess. He's very smooth about the thing. We tried, you know, a lot of years before we could beat him.
Johns edged Schnars by just 24 points to earn the championship mantle.
Oh, Bobby was, he was great. I always thought he was the smartest racer there ever was, because he run onto one kind of a chassis, and on any car he built himself. From then on, it was the same car. Bobby Schnars was the same way. He used to gear his rear end up in order so he wouldn't spin like that the whole way down the straightaway, so the power would like match the track. And I always run way more gear maybe than I always wanted to be able to spin anywhere I could, but never do it was my aim, you know. Almost do it, but never actually. Like running on ice. That's the way you run on ice. And
other single race winners besides Lamancuso were Freddie Knapp, Chuck Piazza, and first-timers Kenny C. and Dick Litz.
First time I drove a late model, I won the feature. They asked me if I wanted to drive it, and I said sure, and they just worked out. The first night I won the feature at Stateline, and next day we went over to, they were racing over at North Collins there on Sunday afternoon, and went over there, and I was running about third, I think, or something like that, and the first two, Finelli and somebody else got tangled up, and I went by them on the last lap or something like that, so I won first two late model features in a row, so I thought that was a pretty good deal. The bubble soon burst after that.
The Layfield Memorial Race was viewed by Alice Layfield, Dean's widow, who presented the Brockway Ace with a waist-high trophy. Squirt and Dean raced against each other for quite a few years, but they were always closest of friends. I'm sure Dean would have enjoyed watching this one, Mrs. Layfield said.
5'11" just meant a guy that came up there and won everything. Yeah. You know, Stanley Squirt Johns, big orange pumpkin car, big black lettering on the side, and a very, very fair, very fair but hard-working driver that you could start him 30th in a car in a field of 20, and he would work his way up there. He had a nose for the lead. He had a nose for the lead.
The Sportsman Division, 1932 to 58 cars, joined the late models on the weekly racing card in 1963. Originally designed as a hobby class, it proved to be a source of extra income for late model regulars Freddie Knapp, Sammy Lamancuso, and Ron Blackmer, who pulled double duty, racing as many as 6 events per night. Although Blackmer won a season-high 5 races, Knapp won the track title for owners Russ and Barry Thompson. Another top man in the Sportsman Division was Harold McGrath, better known as Stroker McGurk. At the November 16th Stateline Erie's banquet, drivers and fans were stunned when Lloyd Williams announced that Hyle Russell was in serious condition at Hammett Hospital following an operation to remove a brain tumor. Williams reported that Russell had been ill the past 2 months. 8 days later, Hyle was dead at the age of 35.
It's been a hard day's night, and I've been working like a dog.
The owners of Bus-Dye Speedways performed major surgery on Stateline during the off-season. A sinkhole in Turn 4 that had been the cause of many accidents in 1963 was repaired by digging down 3 feet, lining the area with railroad ties, and then refilling the hole. The track was reclayed with material obtained from digging a pond at one end of the parking lot. Water from the pond was used to prepare the track during the season. Bobby Schnars entertained 4,600 fans by winning the late model season opener. The inaugural Hyle Russell Memorial Race was fittingly captured by Hyle's hometown friend and former teammate Eddie Kisco. Eddie, who made a last lap pass of Squirt Johns, was driving a Chevy, powered by the very engine Russell had used the previous year.
So Eddie bought this car, and he took the engine out of there and put it in this car. And that was an engine that Hyle had built the engine for that. It was a 327 Chevy. I don't know what it was out of, if it was one of those vet motors or not. And that's when they had that Hyle Russell Memorial Race, the first one.
Paul Wilson, driving Julian Busing's number 9 Ford, was the next winner. Floyd Finale congratulated Wilson and then said, "My time's coming." A week later, Finale made good on his prediction. Ronnie Blackmer won the following 2 Saturdays in Frank Ruhlman's '64 Chevelle. The annual Firecracker 50 was held in front of a record standing room only crowd of 7,100 fans. Squirt Johns, who passed Bobby Schnars on the 40th lap, said, "I learned a lot from this one. When I tried to catch Bobby running full bore, I slipped too much, so I took my foot off the gas a bit and eventually caught him." The next winner was Freddie Knapp driving the Berglund Chevrolet Chevelle. The midseason championship fell to Blackmer as the Youngsville Ace won for the 3rd time. As the dog days of summer heated up, so did the driver of the orange 511 Dodge. Squirt reeled off 4 consecutive wins as July turned to August. The Dean Layfield Memorial was described by Post-Journal sports writer Jim Johnson as a 3-ring circus, and Johns was the ringmaster of the center arena. The outer 2 rings were filled with a conglomeration of chin-to-chin confabs and outright fisticuffs. Dick Gilbert charged the flag stand and punched flagman Pete Abers. Gilbert felt that Abers had not thrown his red flag soon enough to protect his stalled car. Track owner Jerry Frank had to restrain his brother Bob Gilbert from joining the fracas. The Gilberts were suspended 1 week for their actions.
I run hard, and I'd fist fight it at the drop of a hat.
Is that right?
Oh, yeah. I kicked the shit out of the flagman right in front of the 4,500 people.
Next, car owner Joe Mobilia bent the flagman's ear for a good 5 minutes about his job performance before the race could be restarted.
I used to be the troublemaker.
Troublemaker? Never got in a fight with any of them, did you?
No. They got to fight with me.
The final act of the night switched to the pits, where Floyd Finale, taking exception to Chuck Piazza's driving techniques during the feature, applied a headlock to the offending driver, but cooler heads dissolved the argument.
I used to get pretty hot occasionally. But nothing was ever vicious.
Yeah.
If there was any arguments, they only lasted a few minutes and it was gone the next day.
Yeah.
Back in the center ring, Squirt explained his win streak.
I always had the idea that, you know, when you put the back end out, you're using your horsepower to make the, you know, you're going north down the one straightaway and you're going to turn around and go south down the other straightaway. And when you put the back end way out and spin the back tires, you're using your horsepower to turn the car. I always figured to use as much of the tires, the side bite of the tires to turn the car, and and use the horsepower to get down the straightaway.
The final race of '64 was another night fraught with controversy. At the conclusion of the 100-lap Grand Championship, new starter Art Anderson flagged Jim Scott and his '64 GTO as the winner. But while Scotty carried the checkered flag proudly around Stateline for the first time in his hard-luck career, a recheck of the scoring sheets had begun. 30 painful minutes later, Lloyd Williams announced that Chuck Piazza had won the race. Scott was unconvinced, but the decision stood.
Chuck Piazza, he took a race away from me. I always felt I won at Stateline. 100-lap championship, I always felt. We were just talking about that today. I still think I might have won that race, you know, but...
What happened?
They flagged me as the winner, you know, and we had a bit of a... They checked the score sheets and said I lost a lap somewhere along the line.
Final point tabulations revealed that although Squirt had won 5 features to his 3, Ron Blackmer's other more consistent finishes were enough to make the 23-year-old the Stateline champion. In the sportsman division at Stateline for 1964, Fred Clark had 5 wins, Stroker McGurk 4, Bill Felton and Ron Blackmer had 2, while Chuck Piazza and Paul Wilson had 1 each. But as it was in the late model division, Blackmer's consistently good finishes resulted in the track championship for the driver of the 4 Junior. The mechanical wizardry of Frank Ruhlman, combined with the driving talent of Ronnie Blackmer, had resulted in 2 track titles in the same year.
I had the edge. I had Frank, and I had all I wanted to do was race then. And it was, I don't know, lucky.
At the same time, you're racing late models. So, I mean, not only the success of the sportsmen, but the success of the late models. Was that hard to just, from a driving perspective?
No, back then the little cars were faster than the big ones. 'Cause we had races together, and the sportsmen would outrun the big ones.
Did you have a preference?
Oh, I like the little ones, yeah. I like open wheels because you can see where you're putting them.
Right.
When the flag drops, the bullshit stops. You know.
Opening night 1965 found 5,500 fans in the grandstands and 33 late models in the pits, 20 of them brand new 65 models. Even a checker cab, driven by Heil Van Arsdale, made its debut. Making their late model debuts were rookies Dave Turner, Kenny Shear, Johnny Boyd, Ray Jordan, Zon Davison, and Larry Parmenter.
When I started racing, when you come off of that 4th turn coming down to the flag and your left foot was bouncing on the clutch so hard from the excitement, that was the excitement. And there was nothing else around. It was just you and how many ever else was out there, and you wanted to pass every one of them, or stay ahead of them, whichever it was. So, but it was a disease that you just can't describe. I mean, there was an excitement there that you went after. And you would make a deal with the devil to get to the racetrack.
The first night I took it out there, I thought, what am I thinking? Why would I start out in a late model? I never drove anything in my life, you know. Well, needless to say, I didn't do very well because if I could make a lap without spinning out, I'd be doing pretty darn good, you know. Every race, I was like scared, sick to my stomach scared, you know. And John Seeley and Freddie Knapp were leaning against the wall over there one night, and I went over and asked those guys, I said, do you ever get over this feeling of being sick when a race starts? And Fred says, if you ever get over that feeling, quit racing. Back then you could run hot laps at the beginning of the night, you know. And I was coming out of 4 and not running the thing real hard, but kind of hard, and all of a sudden it sounded like my motor just got louder, louder, louder. I thought, what the heck is going on? I took my foot off the gas. It was Larry Parmenter driving by me, you know.
What kind of a racer were you, Larry?
Hard nose.
Were you?
Yeah, I had a tank, weighed 6,500 pounds.
No, it didn't.
Yeah.
6,500
pounds. Nobody dared to hit me.
What kind of an engine did you have to pull it?
427 with crawler roller cams in it. I could rev it up at 7,200 RPMs. Marty Rader one time, he spun out in front of me and I hit him, took the whole front end of his car off. He come up and said to me, he said, "That's a pregnant elephant."
Despite the changes, a familiar face was found in the winner's circle as Bob Schnars debuted a new Chevelle to his satisfaction. The next Saturday, Schnars won again before a streak was finally halted by defending champ Ronnie Blackmer the following week. The Memorial Day weekend featured football weather temperatures, but 4,000 shivering fans cheered Chuck Piazza driving the Berglund Chevrolet entry to the win in the second annual Hyle Russell Memorial. Piazza acknowledged the significance of the victory by saying, "It's pretty hard breaking into the Ron Blackmer, Bob Schnars, Squirt Johns, Tom Dill foursome. They do a lot of winning, so I feel pretty good."
I always thought, especially after I moved down south, that you know, I was fortunate being able to run with really a lot of good talent, and I couldn't help but think that some of those guys in the south in the right place at the right time would have been probably superstars on the NASCAR circuit.
We had a fellow that was racing there, and he finally came to work for me, and that was Chuck Piazza.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so Chuck said, "Boy, I'd sure like to drive a car for you." And Chuck was really a gung-ho individual, and he wanted to get going. I ordered a new coupe with a 396 in it, 4-bolt mains, and we pulled the engine out of that thing and went all through it. Like the old story says about racing, a lot of millionaires were made by racing, but they were billionaires when they started.
Joe Tomes, a hard-luck driver from Olean, shocked everyone when he was able to keep his 65 Mercury out front of a 26-car field the first Saturday in June.
I'll never forget when the guy from Bradford, Joe Tomes, won the race from the pole position with a big old 65 Mercury. Frank Roman says, "I'm done racing. When the guy can win from the pole, I'm out of here," you know, and he did. He quit.
The next week, Kenny C. added Joe Mobilia's Chevy to the list of winning cars. During the off-season, Squirt had replaced the Dodge he'd driven the past 4 years with a spanking new 65 Plymouth with a 426 Hemi. The big man from Brockway finally got his new mount rolling as he captured first-place money the next 2 weeks. The annual Firecracker 50 was won by Tom Dill in his Meadowcraft Dodge in front of 6,800 fans.
Well, I think one of my heroes is Tom Dill. He's one guy that you wouldn't want to try to get by on the last lap, I'll tell you, because either you both wouldn't finish the race or you wouldn't anyways.
Floyd Finale ended a year-long drought when he won 2 out of the next 3 events. First, he won in his own 64 Chevy, and then 2 weeks later, he took the top prize in Julian Busing's Ford.
I just kept teasing him about get them kids out of that car and put a man in there and win some races.
Bud Finale, and then it was Floyd Finale after that. I used to call him the Grand Finale.
Sandwiched between the 2 finale wins was yet another midseason championship victory for Squirt. Point leader Johnny Whitehead then won his first of the year at Stateline for the Russ Thompson 39 team.
Johnny Whitehead, the old flying farmer. Another guy that he wouldn't take no crap from anybody either.
He lost the battle but won the war. Those words describe the fortunes of Johnny Whitehead as the 65 season came to an end with the 100-lap Grand Championship race. Whitehead had built up a 3/4 lap lead but suffered a broken drive shaft on the white flag lap. Bob Schnars capitalized on the twist of fate to be the first to starter Art Anderson's checkered flag. John Seeley, ever the sportsman, pushed Whitehead across the line in 5th position. It was a tough loss for Whitehead, but his injured feelings were soothed by earning the points championship his rookie season.
I drove for Russ and Barry Thompson. Russ was the father, the owner of it, and Barry was a real workhorse. There wasn't anything I asked 4 on the car. He would do just whatever I asked, and so I had a lot of confidence in the car. I drove a Sportsman for him the year before, and I knew the car would be in tip-top shape. It would handle good, and it would run good. And I knew if I did something to it in the heat race, messed it up, they would fix it by the feature time. It would be a first-class car.
I don't know, I got to be a friend of Johnny Whitehead, and he was a character, I'll tell you.
Mm-hmm.
But he could drive, and he just had the knack for it, you know. And so I would talk to him and get him squared away a little bit, and he'd show up every time and everything and get the job done. So, and what I liked about him was he'd run the fence. You know, he'd run out wide, just stand right in it and run it wide, and nobody wanted to run out there because it's too close to the fence. And it cost me a few times because he'd get tangled up in it. But I mean, he run good most of the time, and you could go to a different racetrack, and he seemed to adapt to it quicker than some people would.
The sportsman class was thoroughly dominated by Ronnie Blackmer in '65. The defending champion sold his title-winning buggy and built an even better mousetrap. The Ford Junior won an amazing 10 of the 15 feature races en route to a second consecutive track title. Dale Clark and Sam Colwell won the other sportsman races. All hail Ron Blackmer, king of the coupes. An abandoned farm with trees scattered here and there became Stateline Speedway. Many of the trees growing there were used to construct bleachers and guardrails, but other trees remained on the perimeter of the property. While reflecting about the birth of the racetrack in the succeeding years, owner Don Frank once mused, "If only the trees could talk." The trees would tell about 5 men with little capital, but plenty of hard work and determination. Dozens of folks from Sugar Grove who helped make their friends' dreams a reality. Lean seasons with low car counts and poor attendance. Profitable years with plenty of cars and record-setting admissions. Unbearably cold and rainy weather. Spectacularly beautiful Saturday nights. Hundreds of daring young men with little more than a hope and a prayer. Mechanical geniuses and driving legends. A time when every gas station had a race car, and the race cars looked like streetcars. Loyal fans who came week after week, always sitting in the same place. Fans sitting on the roof of the restrooms because there was nowhere else to sit. Pit parties that lasted till dawn. French fries served in paper cones sprinkled with vinegar and ketchup. Larger-than-life heroes and grandstand friends. A time when life seemed simpler, and for many, the best years of their lives. On Saturday night, after the laps have been counted, after the fans have left the parking lot, after the lights have been doused, and after the last partier has deserted the pits, if you're very, very still, you might be able to hear the trees whispering among themselves. Do you remember the time?
And sometimes done. Car number 21 and 37 battling it out for the second spot. There's Hal Russell in car number 4 and Paul Wilson in 28 battling it out for the first place. Bobby Stars and M1 still in the lead, getting a terrific pace in the feature within of the 80s. Almost a quarter lap ahead of the rest of the field. Jim Hicks in 37 still holding on to that second spot. Joey Bayfield in 21 third. Paul Wilson in 28 fourth. Hal Russell in car number 4 fifth. Two laps to go. 2 laps to go for Bobby Stars and M1, your lead car. 37, still hanging on to the number 2 spot. And Paul Wilson is pressing hard for that number 3 spot as they come out of the second turn. They're bumper to bumper for the second, third, and 4th spot as they hit turn number 3. 1 lap to go, 1 lap to go for Bobby Stars, car number M1. In the second place, yet, it is Jim Hicks in 37. Third, Bill Rachel in 21. Fourth, Kyle Russell in car number 4 on the move. Here it is, the checker flag and the win, Bobby Stars. And the battle for second, and it is Jim Hicks in 37. Third, Kyle Russell in car number 4. And fourth, Bill Rachel in 21. Here he is, the terrific job of driving his second feature event of the season. What do you say, a big hand for Bobby Stars?